this kicked off.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Okay. Well, hey, Brian. Can you kick off the roundtable this morning?
You want me to give the spiel? I
Yes,
will.
please.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Agile PM Roundtable. So this roundtable is a collaboration between people from Agile PDX and the Portland PMI chapter that brings together project managers, scrum masters, and agilists to share, discuss, and learn how Agile principles and practices can be applied to the work that people do at all levels of the organization. The roundtable seeks to build connections between Agile and project management communities, and we strive to create an inclusive environment for people with curious and open minds. Through our partnership with Agile PDX, we are able to provide this video conferencing service and a platform for reaching out to the Agile community. I was going to say in Portland, but really across the world, which has been fantastic. All that is made possible by the Agile PDX community and their sponsors, including sponsor ProFocus Technologies. Thank you, ProFocus, for your continued support of Agile PDX. You can learn more about our sponsors at the Agile PDX site, agilepdx.org. For those of you who hold credentials that require continuing education credits, Agile PDX, or us, offers a tool that supports the auditing of professional development units, PDUs to PMI, and Scrum educational units, SCUs. We will, in the next 24 hours, simply visit the bit.ly that we've posted to the chat and go ahead and fill out some basic information, your name and email address. And we promise not to sell that to anybody. Volunteers at Agile PDX, again, us, will report your participation to the certification granting organizations for auditing purposes. You still need to claim your individual continuing education credits, but Agile PDX will report that you attended today for auditing purposes. With that, David, do you want to talk through what we're going to talk about today?
Yes. So at today's Agile PM Roundtable, we are very pleased to welcome two very special guests, April Jefferson and Mark Kilby. April is an independent coach, collaboration facilitator, experience crafter, game creator, speaker, and organizing founder. She adds value to the world by guiding the journey to nourish oneself with generative engagement, enjoying harmonizing mindsets, crafting applied learning experiences, and holding space both in person and online. April is best known for the transformation and curation of spaces that keep people at the center. These experiences include Future of Work 24 Hours, Women in Agile Open, the 5-part Growing Racial Equity series for Black Lives, sponsored by the Agile Alliance, and with the clients she has engaged with. Mark co-founded a number of professional learning organizations such as Agile Orlando, Agile Florida, Virtual Team Talk, the Agile Alliance Community Group Support Initiative, and Remote Together, among others. Through speaking, training, coaching, and writing, his easygoing style helps Agile organizations discover their path to success and sustainability. It has also been rumored that Mark is an author, consultant, international speaker, distributed Agile guide, a facilitator, father, husband, a Florida native, endangered species, and former rocket scientist. Really. Today, April and Mark will lead us in an unscripted conversation about the relationship of open space with agility. This format is a little different from our usual 20 to 25 minute presentation followed by Q&A with the group. We encourage you to leave your microphones on unless you're concerned about background noise and contribute to the conversation as you'd like. As with any virtual group conversation, please be respectful of others and leave room for everyone to contribute. Feel free to use Zoom's raise hand feature to indicate that you'd like to speak. We think this format will make for a dynamic and lively conversation, but it is new to us, so please bear with us as we inspect and adapt. As I mentioned before, April and Mark have asked that we asked them, that we record today's session, and with their permission, we will make the recording available to confirmed registrants and to the general community via the Agile PDX Slack and YouTube channel. We plan on recording the entire event. If you have concerns or questions, please feel free to use the chat during the meeting to discuss them with me. You can also follow up with us today after today's session. After our discussion with April and Mark, we'll set aside a couple of minutes towards 8 o'clock for any announcements that people might have. Then we'll break shortly before 8 a.m. so that we can transition to whatever comes next in our day. But first, a little bit more about today's topic. Open space technology enables groups of people, large and small, to explore any problem space, from launching a new software project to reconciling long-standing social inequities. With only a couple of simple rules, open space has an almost magical quality that lets the right people have the right conversations in the right place at the right time. Open space and agility share a common ethos of enabling real people to approach real problems with inquiry, empathy, and creativity. Today, we will convene a dialogue that explores how open space and agility complement each other by leveraging the knowledge that is present here in this virtual room. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to April and Mark to begin the discussion about the relationship of open space with agility.
Thank you.
Wow, first of all,
Radio
David,
voice.
It's a wonderful radio voice.
Thank you.
And Brian, thank you for your role in this too. Having run many meetups, I know how important those public service announcements are. So I appreciate your contribution as well. I also appreciate almost everybody having their camera on at what, 7 a.m. your time. That's impressive. That's very impressive. You know, for April night, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, so we've had time to wake up. As David mentioned, this is unscripted. And so we have some things to talk about, as you see around April and I, but this is really a conversation. So a conversation around open space and agility and wherever we go from there. And we actually started the conversation before some of you joined us. So April, to that, what would you like to add?
I would say that as we talk, feel free to chime in and ask us to dig deeper and stuff. And because we're gonna talk through some of what you see around us in the sphere. These are some of the elements of open space for people who've open space with me or Mark, or you probably heard us talk about some of these, such as the bulletin board, that marketplace, the circle or breath. But Mark and I are currently writing a book about the mindset that we learn exists in open space. And which I loved as we were kind of introducing what this roundtable about, is that open mindset. So we'll get into that, because that's really, I believe, a part of that deep connection with open space and agility. Like, what is Agile? And a lot of people talk about Agile is a mindset. It's not simply a framework, it's a mindset. And for Mark and I, we've learned that open space is a mindset. And what's that connection between these mindsets, as we think about like the mindset of lean, the mindset of Agile, is that there's some key elements that support that mindset that you can take with you as you engage and in your work, as you're transforming organizations, teams, your products and services. You can leverage this mindset of agility and open space to unlock and unblock what's going on. Do you want to add anything?
So I'm curious, and you can, if you don't, I see some people have their cameras off. That's perfectly okay with us. We get it. It's early. So you can either raise a virtual hand or real hand in this question, but who has been to an open space event before? Okay, so Jean has, Brian, David. Okay, it looks like Catherine quickly raised her hand there. All right, cool. Okay, so not everybody. Oh, Catherine says no, she hasn't been. Okay, all right. So when you attend an open space event, and if it's your first time, you can be in for a little bit of a shock, because the facilitator will, and others that are there, will invite you into a circle, and it's, depending on the size of the group, it could be multiple circles, but it's all very much surrounding each other, so there's no front of the room. And the facilitator will walk into the center of the circle at the start and just explain a few simple rules for the day. That one, there is no agenda. And it's really up to the group gathered to build the agenda. You've been invited there for some purpose, something that's important, and you build that agenda based on that. And there's a law and a few principles related to that law. So this is why you see above our heads this idea of mobility, and that's really the law. You'll hear about the law of 2 feet. We tend to say the law of mobility. And really the way it is often phrased is, if you are neither learning or contributing, you go where you can't do that. And it's just that simple. April, did you want to get into the principles, or did you want to, and I see that Jean, looks like Jean
Yeah.
had something there.
Yeah. Do you guys think that the Wikipedia page that describes open space technology is still in good order? It's still a good reference?
Ooh. So yes, and
Yeah.
It's
is
brief.
the best way to talk about it. When you start practicing open space wholeheartedly, and you move beyond the theater of open space, there's more learning.
Mhm.
So the original Wikipedia page probably talks about 4 principles. And for people who have been practicing for a long time, we now recognize 5. They probably talk about the law of 2 feet. And as we've learned more about, hey, you know what? Some people may not have feet.
Mhm.
And that just one question there, like, oh, what do they not have feet? What makes sense? It's about mobility.
Yeah.
And then that's why
So
we say that law of personal mobility. And then it has unlocked so much when we thought about mobility. We thought about that mental mobility, not just the physical mobility that's around it. So that's why I say it's a yes, and it's a
yeah,
journey. And even with the roles that they talk about in open space, people talk about the butterfly and the bumblebee. But
yeah,
as we've learned in over these past years, there's another role that has surfaced, like a groundhog. Ah, my little
bless you.
sneeze. And people talk about other things like penguins, where they're like helping out in the space. So other roles have emerged, and that's the beauty of it. And that's why, that's agility. It's like you're changing, it's still growing. It's
Yeah,
not, it's moving beyond the dogma of different things. That was the starting point.
yeah.
But
So Jean, another way to think of it is that description of open space is equivalent to reading the Scrum Guide. So the Scrum Guide will tell you the mechanics, but it's very different experiencing it.
I see that they've even brought it up a level above the kind of roles and rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
On that page has been completely modified. So I know there's a community of open space facilitators online. There's an annual conference. There are lots of open space conferences. And Harrison Owen, I think, wrote 2 books. So where do open space facilitators kind of stay in touch with what's going on broadly with open space? Because there's the open space leadership community now, and all of that, open space agility, all of that going on.
So can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So
Mark.
let me jump in on this one. So the way open space facilitators stay in touch is by holding space. And I was trying to get in there before April, because I know April will then talk about all the different spaces she is holding. She is not comfortable unless she is organizing 2 or 3 open spaces simultaneously in a month. Okay, because I could say this because I've worked with her now for over 6 months now. She lives and breathes open space. So that idea of a circle, which you see as one of the words we have. Well, I'm pointing to hers, not mine there. That idea of a circle is putting everyone in an equal position, bringing community together. So those of you who have been in an open space event, you definitely get that feeling. There is no leader in an open space. As a matter of fact, a good facilitator will, as soon as they start the open space, you will see them kind of fade into the background. You probably won't see them again until the end of the event. They might pop up in different places. All right, so I had to jump in there ahead of you, April, because I
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry.
See, what I was actually gonna articulate, Jean, is that there are different places, like the Open Space Institute, US. I'm actually on their board. I'm on a few open space boards and initiatives. I'm on the Open Space Initiative for the Agile Alliance. I'm on the board for Agile Open Northwest, and also for the Open Space Institute, which is open space beyond the Agile world. And that's a community of facilitators, people who have worked on holding space. But for people who haven't, how I got into open space, I just went to an open space and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do that, right? And started exploring that craft, and I explored that craft by attending open space and holding space and learning. And everyone is not the same. That's a lot of part of Mark and I's work, and what of the work that I do with some of the open spaces I hold. Everyone is different. I'm not doing the same thing. The community is different. Who's there? One of the principles of open space, whoever's there are the right people. And I do a lot of work in design thinking. So you want to understand and be empathetic with the who, right? When you're in your organizations and your teams, you want to understand who is there. Like Mark talked about, that circle, that community. We do a lot of work that open space is naturally very generative, where there's that shared power. And with our teams, we talk about, hey, be self-managed, self-organized. That's generative. Open space supports that. So what the challenge for you is that in all things, how can you keep holding space in that way to give the people that you're working with, make sure there's that shared power. As an open space facilitator, or some people say, oh yeah, you're holding space. For me, as I look at it, is that I try to move from me holding space for you all to us all holding space together quite quickly. And that's what open space experience is like, is that circle, that community, or maybe you're talking about that team. And there's other people in this community who are also exploring that dynamic reteaming and understanding that movement of mobility. And into the biggest thing is that's the part of agility, like the constantly challenge yourself. That's what else? What else? Are we constricting ourselves from possibilities? When we talk about the concept of the bulletin board, those are opportunities, but you don't have to take them all. You can choose where you want to go, and that's that marketplace. Oh, this is maybe where I want to experiment. Now that didn't work. Okay, let's go over and do this thing.
Yeah. So in that, so an even shorter answer is, how do you stay in touch with open space? Is just connect with April. that's the shorter answer. That's way easier. And I want to actually want to tie it into what May asked in chat, because I think it's a very good question. So she had asked, are the terms open space and unconference interchangeable or technically different? They're related. So as I understand it, and you can go into Wikipedia again and either search unconference or search Barcamp. I think Barcamp was one of the first unconferences. However, they all were influenced by open space. So unconferences were really influenced by open space. And I've talked to several people who have started different unconferences. So it has that influence, just like maybe you started with Scrum, maybe you started with Kanban, and over time, as you really understood how it worked, you said, oh, I see how I can change this to make it work better in our environment. Not work better for me, but for us, and again, that community. So from my experience, and April might have a different take on this, because we actually haven't talked about unconferences much. But in my experience, the unconferences are offshoots of open space, which is now almost 30 years old. It's been around for quite some time. And but it's that idea of having almost a self-managed gathering of people. I wouldn't even say it's a conference. It's really a gathering. That's the way I really look at it. It's everyone coming together. So that's where I appreciate Gene's questions. I appreciate Bao sharing the link. I appreciate May with your question there, because that's bringing us all in to really grapple with this question of how is open space and Agile related. And hopefully you're starting to see some of that with how we're answering the question. Yeah, just come off mute, Bao.
Yeah, go ahead. Well,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm relatively new to the open world, but I have been to open houses. No, I was joking. I think a lot of those elements sound familiar to me, like storytelling, right? That's really how we connect with people, how you outline your vision to your team and bring everyone together. So my question is, so I have been using Scrum framework for software development project stuff. What's some of the suitable projects or situations for best to use open space technology, like the open space concept? I think the original term is open space technology, actually. So it's kind of interesting. So what situation would be probably most ideal for, utilizing this approach?
so for me, I say in all things. In all things, there would not be a situation where these concepts are not used. For the first point, when you're looking at working with teams, I believe there's you need agreement to be coached, right? Not and that's invitation, right? And so they have a decision to walk in their own mobility of yes or no. And a lot of times things are put upon people, right? How allowing them to own their own change and transformation, because it could be Scrum, it could be something else, right? And giving them the opportunity to decide or maybe switch. And that's my experience with working with teams, is that, hey, saying allowing them to own the how, right? You're sharing with them the what and the why, but they figure out the how. And then and they may ask you like, oh, so what are some of those options? And you can share with them those options. That's getting them to own it, because it's sustainable if they own their own change. So that's part of like invitation. And they that's the initial concept. And you're inviting in breath, that freedom for them to decide, that bulletin board, those opportunities for them to think of for themselves, instead of it's giving some trust there, right? To say that, oh, you know what? The people doing the work, they can make smart decisions. Like, you didn't hire people who are unintelligent. You brought them on for a reason, and giving them the space to be able to figure things out. And you can help them along that journey. Your thoughts, Mark?
Well, I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about fast Agile, since you were
Oh,
there in the very early days of it.
in the birthing.
Yeah, when Ron was getting that started.
Well, so looking at for fast agile, for people like marketing, that's like that's called fluid agile scaling technology. It's a complex adaptive system, which is open space, right? Is allowing people like, yeah, you can do Scrum with that. It's just saying that it's allowing the community, like the people doing the work, to really own it. You know, let's look at one whole team. That's why I look at the current Scrum guide, for example. I was actually really excited when I read it and what came out, because they finally kind of caught up to what many of us have been doing for a long time. Like, oh, there's one team instead of these different things, and how that completely changed the dynamics. They cut out all the dogma, right? And made it quite simple, something that that is a small practice. And the biggest thing, like, hey, are you having fun? Are you delivering value? And it's not about checking the box, getting away from that checklist. And the path that is actually has more of the spirit of agility and the mindset of agility with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for, yeah. That's,
go ahead, Bao, and then I was going to.
Insights, yeah. No, I think one of the benefits I can think of particularly would be empower team members, particularly give voice to the historically quiet team members, because they are a little bit put off or afraid of that formality, speaking in front of an audience, and just yeah, I love that it's a negotiation between the team members to take on whatever they can take on. Commitment, I can see this all translated to the Agile principles, or the Agile, one of 5 values: commitment, courage, respect, teamwork. I forget some, but it's really neat, tied to them very nicely. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I've applied open space at my job a couple of times, and each there are certain points where there's an inflection, there's a change that's coming, and whether it's new people in the organization, new goals, and I found open space was a good way to get everybody focused, give people an opportunity to maybe acknowledge some of the uncertainty, or to state what they think their truth is, and then it helps us reconcile all of that. And so that's kind of high level conceptual, but really practical. What it meant is that people could go have the conversations that they wanted to have. Hey, a couple of engineers are really excited about this new technology. Great. They've got a space to go spend 45 minutes, an hour, however long it was, to share what they've learned. People had similar questions about, well, what might the future look like, or hey, what are others expectations, and they had that space to explore it. And the nice thing for me as a convener is that, because there are these simple rules, because there's not a lot of structure, not a lot of planning, I can sort of say, okay, here's paper that you can stick to the wall and some pens. This really is all you need. And then they got to, well, not only have the conversations they want, but they got to do the work. So then I find that it can be very applicable. At the open space can be very applicable for the big things, but then the principles help guide the little things. Everything from the law of mobility, realizing that if you're in a meeting that you really don't want to be in, you can leave, or you can at least express that it's like, this isn't working for me. Can we try something else?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I've had with teams, is sharing that law of mobility, because they start asking better questions about how they use their time. Because when you see people, you go to a meeting, then most of the time they're just staying there because, oh, we scheduled, they're on their laptops and not attentive, and like, oh, we could have, did you need a meeting for that? Could you do that? Just a message. If your meeting, is it collaborative? For me, meetings are collaborative, not to just spout information at people, right?
Yeah.
So you're asking different questions. And I would concur, David, that from my experience that that's why it's like, oh, open space is an unconference. Like, yeah, don't think about open space as a conference. Open space is a way, is how you may gather. Because I found that the most powerful open space is in organizations because it leads to action. And every time I've done it in organizations, they come out with real actions for those wicked problems, those elephants that have not been addressed, and over 95% of them actually get done.
Mm-hmm. So let me, well, first I'll ask a question. So I was looking for a picture, and so you see this picture, and I'm going to ask, is this an open space conference or is this big room planning?
Probably an open space conference. It's hard to see
like
in the background. Yeah.
So it could be either. It could be either. So this one happens to be a picture of the 2019 Agile Coach Camp. They usually have 100, 125, and they don't go much larger than that. Some of you know I do quite a bit of work with distributed teams and distributed organizations. The last one I was in, I was the internal coach. I was the first coach hired in. And we had people from Eastern Europe all the way to Alaska. And once a year, we would bring everyone in. And the first time we did it, we planned a formal conference with speakers. And we got through the conference at the end of 3 days, and a survey went out, and we asked, how did it go? And everyone went, yeah. And so the senior VP of product, who was my boss, said, what can we do for next year? I went, well, I've got an idea. So we did open space, and trying to convince a bunch of senior leaders and engineers to fly literally around the planet to a location with no agenda. Trust me, that was not easy to sell them on that. After the first hour, where they got to construct their own agenda, and imagine a group about 3 times this size, because we had about 300 in the company. So it was the entire company. It was all of engineering, a good number of sales and marketing, because not all those people could be there, but we had a pretty good representation. And salespeople were putting up topics, engineers were putting up topics, what was important to them, problems they wanted to solve, going back to April's point. So it's not what senior leadership was posting, although senior leadership was there, but I actually coached them, say, try to hold back pitching topics the first day, just see what comes up. And they were amazed at all the things they learned about their organization by letting just anybody pitch topics and build a board similar to this. So this is what a typical open space or what a typical bulletin board would look like. But is it a bulletin board or is it a Scrum board? It could be either. It could be either. So I just wanted to show these examples as saying there are a lot of parallels between what we do in Agile and what is possible in open space. April, I didn't know if you wanted to add to that, but I just wanted to kind of share those examples.
No, you have it right. Is that it's really only our mind that limits us.
Sure.
Yeah, Amanda, I think you had something there.
You're muted.
We're not, something has muted you, Amanda.
Oh, yeah.
The buzz phrase of 2020 and 2021, you're muted.
Can you type it in chat?
I think Mohan also have a question, right?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. Yeah. Go ahead, Mohan. While Amanda's typing hers.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So basically, I have been working in Agile for some time, for the last couple of years as a PM. So, but I'm new to the open source technology. So open space technology, sorry. So basically, in a typical project situation, right? Like for open space, what is the optimized number of people for a better outcomes or anything, like what is the minimum you expect to be in the open space to be
Wow,
productive?
that's a great question. It doesn't matter who shows up.
Okay.
Whoever's there is the right people. So for a gathering, it could be, for example, it could be 20 or it could be 1,000. I haven't facilitated 1,000 people in an open space yet, but I have done like 300. But there have been, like, I know Harrison Owen has done like 1,000 or something.
I think he said 2,000. Yeah,
2,000.
And Harrison Owen, we probably should say, he's the one that created the format, although he'll claim really he discovered it.
Yeah.
So.
And what I would say in sessions that people offer in open space, again, we want people to understand whoever shows up are the right people for that conversation. It could be 30 people who are interested in this topic, or it could be 2 people, or it could be just yourself. Mm-hmm. All of that is information. So if it's you and 2 people or 5 people, it doesn't mean that it wasn't good. It means that you were the people who are interested and can explore, or maybe the people to bring this to action, right? If you're looking for action. And maybe if you had some topic and no one showed up, that's a moment for self-reflection for you to potentially explore that on your own. So it's really about the mindset of how you think about it. It's not about numbers.
Yeah, thank you, April. I think I think one follow-up question on that is, like, basically, like, all these organizations, right? Mainly I work for the software, so they look for the result-oriented outcomes or meetings or anything, right? Say, for example, if I attend or conduct like this open space with my project or the stakeholders, like, so what outcomes can I show them? Like, what my leadership may ask, like, what did you achieve out of this? So how to put it, like, is there a measurable way I can show that, like, I have achieved so and so, so that the others also can actually implement this in going forward across the organization?
Okay. So a practice in open space is that, yes, it's about the conversation. But one of the things that people do, if they choose, because it's about mobility, is that they take session notes. And that's normally the convener of that session, they take on that responsibility to do so, to gather it. When you have a great session, and you make, especially in the remote space, that it's quite easy for people to kind of collaborate and co-create those session notes. And normally, we call them proceedings if it was an event or a meeting, different things where we kind of collect all of those and send that out. And it may have, like, sometimes I created things in open space before live there, or other times people are like, hey, we just began it, moving to action there, and we kind of like take ownership of how we're going to move forward and figure out like who's gonna maybe like set up the next thing so we can continue with it. So it just depends. Is that helpful, Mohan?
Yes, Abra. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. So I did see Amanda's question. I know we're getting close on time. I want to make sure we answer that, which I kind of answer with the background, but I want to explain. But I have a little bit of a tie-in to Mohan's topic, which will also explain more about open space. So Amanda was asking, I want to make sure I get it right here. Sorry, it's right behind my camera. I'm completely new to open space. I was curious if you could talk about one of the principles and how you've seen it applied. So we're writing a whole book on this, but we won't give you that answer because we don't have that much time. But these are the things that an open space facilitator will cover in the opening circle. So usually there's, no, let me get my direction right. So there's that law of mobility we talked about at first. So if you're neither learning or contributing, go someplace where you can. And April has already referred to some of the others. Whoever comes are the right people. When it starts, it starts. When it ends, it ends. And each of these principles are really versions of that law of mobility. So it's not trying to control everything. It's just kind of going with what happens. So tying it back to Mohan's question, what is the smallest open space you can have? How many people do you need for a conversation? 2. So I have had conversations where I'm thinking about these principles in the law, and somebody wants to chat with me about a few things, and I'll stop them and say, well, hold on, I've got some notes and I've got a pen. Let's just kind of make sure we capture what it is you want. All right, so you had this topic. Oh, it disappears on my background. Okay, so don't use a green screen. So you have this topic, and I'll stick it on the board, and then you wanted to have a jam session, and then you had another question. Okay, so let's maybe set aside some time for each of those in the whole time that we have, and make sure we hit those questions. I just described to you a very small version of open space, which you might have heard called lean coffee. So if you hear somebody talk about lean coffee, it is a very short version of open space. It's another variation. It's taking that idea. Jim Benson and Jeremy Lightfoot, who are in I think they're both in the Seattle area, so not too far. But Jim, I love the way Jim structures his board for this. Instead of topics, he has options, because you can take the options any way you want to. And then this is what we're discussing now. So if somebody walks in the middle of the conversation, they just look at the discussion column and go, oh, I see what topic you're talking about. Let me jump in. And then the last part is epiphanies or actions. So what were the ahas, or what were the actions? So that kind of gets back to what you were asking about, Mohan, is what did we get out of this? What did we learn? What's the epiphany? Or what action are we going to take based on what we learned? And you often see that in larger open space as well. I've seen entire communities spawn out of an open space event. I've seen new open source projects and new companies sometimes even spawn, because people really got passionate about the topics and realized they had an affinity with the people there. The right people were there, and they said, hey, let's see how we can work together after this event. How can we move forward? We actually, so we hadn't talked about this yet, and I know we're close on time. As I mentioned, April and I are writing a book about this open space mindset and how we can work outside the event of open space. And we're interviewing people. We had an interview last night where the person is in a large corporation, and they wanted to have a conference, but they wanted a conference that was an open space. They wanted people to bring topics that were most important to them. So it started off about agility, but it became much bigger than that. And they looked at all the corporate policies, and there was no policy against this. So they just started. They thought they were going to have 20 for the first one. They had 200 people show up. They now have, April, was it 20,000, I think? And so these other open spaces have popped up in this corporation, where the corporation has never had anything like this before. So they finally said, okay, the executives observed some of these and said, okay, this is a good thing. How do we support this? And the people who started said, well, we could use some funds that would help. And so an entire internal conference popped out of open space that was never there before, building communities of practice across this corporation.
If I could add one other thing to look at applying, like just so as you guys are working in the corporate space, is that that principle of wherever it happens is the right place. I'll give the instance of the concept of retrospective. Sometimes people think, well, we can't talk about this. The retrospective isn't till this scheduled time. Malarkey. It makes no sense, right?
Oh,
Call
you didn't use your
shenanigans on that.
Yeah, there are shenanigans. I was waiting for the
Yeah,
shenanigans.
yeah, call shenanigans on that. Inspect in the moment. More rapid change. That's a part of agility. If someone brings up something, well, that's not a part of the agenda. Parking lot, parking lot, parking lot. And then you've ignored it so much, you missed the opportunity because that conversation could have been something that could have really changed how you all thought about it, a problem that could have been solved. And where like maybe people weren't listening, they were being dismissed when they actually had the answer. Like, or you guys could explore it together to get to a needed solution. So maybe look at it again, it's a lot about like thinking about how you engage with one another to support those positive outcomes.
Jean, could you say a little bit more about what you put in chat about the emerging consciousness?
Yeah. So long before we were born, the notion of the perspective of consciousness emerged. It's kind of back in the time of the Enlightenment. It has dominated the 20th century, but integral consciousness started emerging in mid-20th century. Now, this is just one view of consciousness. There are many different views of consciousness. The three books, since we're down to the wire, that I want to direct you to are one by Michael Spade. It's S-P-A-Y-D. He's coming from the integral perspective. And another one by Jeff, whose last name I can't remember, which is terrible because he was a reference in my book and I admire him a lot. It's called Conscious Software Development. And this is a really, really good little book. And he was holding back a lot when he wrote that book. He was so-called the first Scrum Master. And then in 2017, I wrote Preservation of the Agile Heart from Mindset to Consciousness. Linda Rising introduced the notion of the Agile of the Agile mindset based on the growth mindset from Dweck's work. And I talked with Linda about, what Agile mindset was doing. And we had the conversation about consciousness, and I know that she and I are aligned on this. Agile mindset is something you can take off like a hat, but the consciousness evolution, you cannot take that. You can't unsee. Like April is an example of someone who sees and can't unsee, right? You can see up, you can see down from where you are, but you can't see up to that new level of you. And all of us have seen people start to progress along this path. And it's a pretty painful path for some people because it rocks their world. I've started as an Agile enterprise coach in a healthcare organization where some people's worlds are getting rocked. This lack of acceptance of the notion that Agile is a manifestation of emerging consciousness gets in the way of transformations actually happening. It's the so-called transformers, the coaches, that get in the way of the transformation because they are wrapped around this notion of Agile mindset. And we could talk about this more, and I would love to talk with you guys about it. But that's the kind of esoteric struggle that we see going on in these large organizations when Agile emerges and then is moved back and emerges. And this is one of the reasons we see multiple runs at moving toward agility in these organizations. People change, organizations don't change, people change. That's because the organizations are made up of people. And I personally am really concerned about the Agile movement, particularly as instantiated through the so-called body of the Agile Alliance, because the Agile Alliance ain't getting it. Yeah. Big
And
conversation,
and
but
on that bombshell,
I was going to say, and to be continued.
it's
Well,
like, Gene, why didn't you
unfortunately,
bring that up at the beginning?
no.
That's a meaty topic.
sorry.
That's a
Yeah.
Y'all kept
So-
saying agile mindset. I'm thinking, no.
So, Jean, I hope you can bring that to the next open space that
I
you
will.
will find definitely May and I at, which is the future of work 24
yeah, now I got to figure out
hours open
which session
space.
that Gene's going
Well,
to so I can be
I
in
will
that
be-
conversation. So
I've actually been having this conversation at open spaces. And a lot of people are kind of like, yeah, interesting, or, don't get this. Because some people, the whole
Yeah.
idea of agile mindset is new, right? But you guys, with the way you're approaching open space, you're onto something here that I think could contribute to this other conversation. And it's like,
Well-
we've got to move the agile movement forward because it's
Yeah.
being surpassed by so darn much.
yeah, I'm aware of those books. I haven't read them. So now it's like, oh, my backlog just increased because I really want to read those. But April and I have been talking about it more as the framework trap. So it's and there's another term for what I can't remember the term now, but the first time you encounter a way of doing things and it leads to that cargo cult mentality, but there's a phrase for which it's like the first encounter. So if you first encounter Scrum, you tend to look at everything through that Scrum lens. If you first started with extreme programming, you look through that lens. If you look at it through the lens of safe, you have a big lens that you're looking at. So you got to be careful. So when I started in Agile, I have the gray hairs. When I started, there weren't many books. There was no Scrum guide, and people used to ask me, "So how do I do it by the book?" And I said, first of all, you write the book, and then you tear up the book. So because if I would tell them, it's like, if I come in and show you Scrum, if I come back in a year or two, I don't want to see the same thing. You should be constantly evolving your process. You should be looking at what do you need to change to improve you, your team, your organization. So even April and I, as we wrote this book, and Gene, I'm now getting a strong urge to say we need to interview you for the book. But as we've interviewed people, as we've written chapters, we see our book shifting, and we realize a book is just a snapshot in time. It's a snapshot in thinking. And I encourage all of you, when you read the SAFE website or the or the Scrum guide, it is a guide. It's got there's some great knowledge in there, but it's not the end all be all. You still have to use this, especially for the situation you're in. So I'm just going to give the public service announcement. Watch the framework trap. Use your brain. Use whatever caffeinated product you need to get the brain going in the morning, and you'll be fine. So
I think that's true, but it's even more than that, Mark. It's the framework is just one aspect of it. We've got to look at the notion of the counting and the measuring versus the poetic nature of experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's only one lens, but I can see it here, right in this discussion. And we aren't, the poetic nature of experience is where humanity is, like, the heart is going, right? The heart is there. But we are still, so many of us, needing to do that kind of counting. We need to have a conversation.
I also want to let you all know that Mark and I, if you want to explore your journey further, maybe Mark can put the link in the chat, is that we have a few different journeys that you can partake in. We see it as a journey and not simply a workshop, because it's a practice in your life. Where if you want to explore your purpose more, or if you want to understand more about holding space and what that looks like with empathy and mobility, we have a few of those things coming up. And you can also find out about our book, and we write about We have a newsletter that we write about the writing process, right? And the learning that happens from it.
So I want to end with one final piece, and we have a hard stop too. So don't worry, David. We kept this conversational because you all bring wisdom. You all bring experience. Yes, we have experience, and we're writing a book. Oh, that's important. But you all have valuable experience from your perspectives, and that's why we like to engage in conversations and not lecture. So thank you
Yeah.
all for your questions, dropping links in the chat. I love that. Please do it on please do it on your meetup page too, so others who couldn't make it or catch the recording have that too. Share the knowledge. That's the best way to open up the space.
And the last link I'll share is because Mark and I are capturing stories. Everyone has a story. We have literally interviewed people, whether they're a stay-at-home mom, a pastor, everyone's not in the Agile community. They're in all sorts of different thoughts communities because you all have stories, that were the things that we talk about, they manifest. And our hope is to help people on the journey so that can show up more in their lives, so that you're doing that unconsciously, living your life with that mobility.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, April and Mark, and thank you everyone who contributed today. Whatever happens is the only thing that it could, and it did, and it was wonderful. So thank you all very much for your time. We'll be back again next month. Please watch our meetup and the Agile PDX Slack for more information about that. Hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Good to meet you all.
Thank you.